All right. Again, good evening, and thank you everybody for joining us for our webinar collaboration conversation this evening. Um, I think it's a daily conversation in the office, in the home, about just the stressful world we're living in right now. So let's take some time for talking about some self-care and care for our students. We are recording this evening, so tomorrow morning sometime, hopefully by lunchtime, you will receive an email with replay information. So if there's someone you think of during the webinar and you think, oh, I wish, so-and-so was here, you'll have a link to the recording that you can share with others later, and if they weren't able to make it here tonight. If you don't see an email by around noon, then the email may have gone in your spam filter, and feel free to let me know. I'm going to give you two email addresses right now so you can add this to your notes so I don't forget about it later. You can email info@englishlearnerportal.com, or you can email English learn. Whoa, hold on. I don't know where that came from. English Learner Portal, sorry about that, at gmail.com. It wants to keep putting up Sophia's email address for some reason. I don't know. It doesn't like that. So info@englishlearnerportal.com or englishlearnerportal@gmail.com. Either of those will come to us. And if you don't see the replay email tomorrow by noon, just let us know. And we'll get that link out to you if we get stuck in the spam filter. All right, I want most of this time this evening to be with Laura, which is why you came here tonight. So I am happy to introduce Laura Gonzalez. She is a colleague of ours that we've met throughout all of our connections in the field, and consistently brings us great ideas for supporting our students. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura and let her finish introducing herself. There you
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you so much to everyone who's logged on. I really hope that we can take advantage of this time to, you know, exchange information. So I have some thoughts that I'm definitely happy and ready to share with you all, but I'm really open to receiving your questions through the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask questions, because I really want this to be helpful and meaningful to you all. So let's please make this engaging as much as we can, given that it's probably after a long day of work. So again, my name is Laura Gonzalez, and I'm currently the Director of Research and Development for One Journey Together. One Journey Together is an LLC that was founded to work with unaccompanied youth who are in shelters in the ORR system. And our goal was to provide curriculums and equip teachers to work as effectively and meaningfully as possible with this population. Now, given everything that's happened recently, we've had to do a little bit of pivoting, probably as a lot of people had, given shifts in the federal priorities. But my goal in anything that I do in this world is still to be supportive of anyone who's working with immigrants, refugees, and newcomers. My personal background includes both education and counseling, and so I really appreciate the fact that we have both educators and counselors and a variety of roles here tonight, knowing that we each have our own way that we're going to go about trying to support mental health and academic, social, personal success for newcomer students. And so I hope that there'll be some ideas that are relevant to you no matter what your role is, because I come from a little bit of both of those worlds. And I'm here in Greensboro, North Carolina. I saw a few folks introduce themselves that they were from North Carolina too. So happy to have some, both folks from my state and from across the country. Okay. So given that in whatever capacity, we're all trying to work with immigrant and refugee newcomers in schools right now, I think we can't even start this topic until we just acknowledge that a lot has changed since January. And so this is just a list of some of the things that have changed. And every day, literally, I keep checking because there's been a lot of legal challenges to some of the executive actions that have come out of the White House. And so just yesterday, I saw that the pause on refugee resettlement, a judge had addressed it and had said that that was not lawful to put that pause on refugee resettlement. So I know that every day there's going to continue to be shifts in our landscape, and it's a lot to keep up with. But as of kind of today, what we know, there was until just yesterday that pause on refugee resettlement. There has also been a termination of processing of people who come kind of on foot to our border, usually the southern border, but not only, requesting asylum. And so there had been this app called CPB1, and they closed the app down. And so, unless there's a lawsuit tomorrow, that still means that nobody is being processed for appointments to claim asylum. And it's even true that people who had appointments through the CPB1 app had their appointments canceled. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of confusion, not only for people um, within the US who are trying to receive and assist newcomers, but confusion for the newcomers themselves who, came to request asylum, thought they had an appointment, then learned that that was all being canceled. Um, so with all of that confusion, I know comes a lot of stress for, as Kelly said, stress for those of us who are trying to be of service and stress for the people whose lives are at stake. We also know that the federal government has shifted their designation of where ICE can do enforcement activities. And so previously, schools and medical facilities and religious facilities were considered kind of off limits for ICE activity, but that also has been changed. And so I imagine those of you who are in schools have been trying to figure out, okay, we used to not have to think about what would we do if ICE showed up at our door. But depending on where you're working now, there's maybe a chance that you will have to think about that. So that may be a conversation you've been having or something that you came here tonight kind of seeking more information about. And we can certainly talk about that if that is of interest. Again, depending on what state you're in, some states now also have agreements with ICE or that the federal government can deputize the local or state law enforcement officials for immigration enforcement. So again, some states that have Democratic governors or Democratic House and Senate may have a little bit more of a buffer for that. But there are attempts to use police and local law enforcement to detain and or participate in handing members of our communities over to ICE. And so once again, I think we understand that that generates a lot of fear for immigrants and newcomers, regardless of whether they have a legal status in this country or not. Because sometimes there's just visual profiling that's happening. People who there might be children who were born here and have citizenship rights, but their parents or a parent may not. And so again, just a lot of turmoil and fear, which then I think sometimes rolls over to people being afraid of even school officials or anyone who they perceive to have an official role. I think people are a little bit wary and trying to figure out who can be trusted or who might be in cooperation with ICE. There has also been the closure of some humanitarian parole programs. So one of them is this CHNV, which stands for Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelan. So people who had received initial permission to come here based on kind of turmoil or difficulties in their home country, those programs have been closed. Some of the temporary protected status programs, which are similar, have also been closed. There have been termination of some federal positions that are related to immigration. Also, the freezing of funding and threats to end under other funding. I'm going to have to stop reading this list because I know it's just too discouraging to go through all of the things all of the no's, all the doors closed. Um, I was telling Kelly right before we started that I have often, referred educators and counselors to nonprofits in the community or non-governmental organizations, sometimes faith-based organizations. But I know many of those have also had to furlough people because they've received cuts to their federal funding. There have been attempts to end birthright citizenship, and then some states are kind of mimicking some of the federal legislation and introducing their own bills that are parallel to what the federal government is doing. So I know that that is a ton, and not much of it is good news. I can't say that I see personally from my vantage point any good news in there at all. However, the one good thing I can say is I am so grateful to be logged on with, 40 or so people who care enough to give some of their time to equip themselves and become, informed as much as possible to still be able to provide, meaningful education, care, support to these communities that are now even more vulnerable and even more frightened than ever. So you all are my reason for hope this evening. So thank you. Before I go on to the next slide, let me just see if anybody has any particular questions about some of these recent executive orders or things that have been shifting around us. And you can do that in the chat, or you can unmute, whatever you prefer.
I have a quick question. My name is Janice Rodriguez,
Yes.
in a East Stroudsburg Area School District in Pennsylvania. When it comes to ICE coming into a building, I have heard today at my meeting, a lot of DSL specialists are talking about if they take a child without telling the parent that they want to go with the child. I'm not sure how that works, if that's possible. But can you speak to that? Like they don't want a child to be able to leave without an adult.
So, and let me just specify that I'm not an immigration attorney, so I am certainly not able to provide legal advice to anyone. So you're saying if the adult who wants to take the child is ICE or is
Mhm.
representing an enforcement agency?
Yes.
Okay. Um, I've I know that a lot of schools are wrestling with this, and I'm not sure, Kelly, if you also have anything to say. I think the best policies that I've heard schools talking about are to do everything that they can to put like when ICE shows up and has paperwork to sort of like slow them down by making sure that it is the correct kind of warrant and that it has the correct kind of signatures, that the names on it are correct. And then, so kind of getting them to prove and verify their reasons for being there. And then maybe in the meantime, working to find caregivers, guardians, parents. I would be I would feel hesitant to ask a school staff person to go along with ICE taking a child into custody. But I don't know, Kelly, if you've encountered this question recently.
Not necessarily that question specifically, but the conversation has come up that before a school or an employee of a school takes any kind of action in these situations, that you really need to have someone at the school contact your district's legal team and let them be the ones to make the decision because we don't want anyone getting themselves in trouble, um, especially with as serious as the law is running right now and as hot as the feelings are around it. So I'm sure most districts are getting a plan in place. So if you, I would highly recommend that you reach out to your district and say, what is our policy and who do we call should we hear about a situation, and make sure you're giving that to
The administration.
the
Yes.
administration, to the school district legal team. Um, yeah, because we don't want you thrown into all that, as
I want to
good-hearted
applaud
as that is.
I want to applaud Laura Gardner because she reached out to me and gave me a lot of information that I forwarded to my department chair, who forwarded to an assistant superintendent because we had no plan.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
I agree with you. It is supposed to go to any kind of showing up is supposed to be immediately followed by telling the principal, and the principal is to call admin. Admin is to, and someone from admin is supposed to show up at the school, delaying, like you said. So I don't know why the teachers feel that it's their place, because we are not attorneys. And Laura said that. Be very careful what position we as ESL or ELD teachers play, because we are not attorneys. We do not know the law. But I was just
Right.
wondering if it came up in any sort of way, what, but again, I'm sorry, this is legal, but it is something we're all dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Right. It's the stress level, and it's your teacher hearts want to take care and protect the children. But there are limits to what we can do, even if it breaks our hearts, and that's hard. But you did give me a good idea that as part of the follow-up, when we send out the replay, I will include Laura Gardner's, what Janice is referring to is that our colleague, we call her the other Laura G, she has been gathering what different districts across the country are doing for their policies when it comes to these things, and she's been compiling them. So I will add Laura Gardner's list of sample policies to our replay notes, so that if your district doesn't have one, you can use that as well.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you brought her up, Janice, and thank you for your question. We also had a question from Sophia that was talking about there was a parent that was concerned that ESL funding services may be cut, and she was reflecting on that because of the budget cuts to research in the private sector and to colleges, and certainly the threats that people have been making about, the potential closure. Nothing has happened yet to the Department of Education, which is where like Title III funding for multilingual learners would be coming through. So I think, again, Kelly and I were saying right before this session that even though it's really hard, we're just trying every day to remind ourselves about the things that are under our control and the things that are not under our control. And so we can certainly do our best to influence that decision by voicing our support for things like Title III funding, letting our senators or representatives know that we would be opposed to the closure or the dismantling of the Department of Education. However, at this point, the election happened, and we are not fully in control of what decisions they decide to make. Again, I will say I've been encouraged by the fact that there's been, a robust response from the legal sector, and that people have been challenging a lot of these, I don't know what adjective to use for these actions, these kind of destructive, off the cuff actions. So that's a long way of saying I don't know yet if those Title III funds will end. Right now, they have not. And so, I would say really doing all that we can to be proactive, to like gather together lists of, if schools can't provide ESL for adults, then to look at libraries or community spaces where similar programs might be happening. Certainly we want to be able to preserve the services that we provide within schools, and I know schools are often very creative at being able to kind of stretch the funding that they have, or kind of like shuffle things around. So again, like educators and school counselors are my heroes. So we don't know yet what will happen, but I think identifying all of the resources in our local communities that we can, so that if something does get cut or lost, then we might have to go to plans B, C, or D and figure out, okay, where else can we, help people find these needed services. Luann said she's a federal programs director, and we've been told the entitlement grants are not going to be affected now, so we should not stress. Okay, I'll take that. That's encouraging. Okay. So the budget proposals that are coming through right now would be for next year in terms of funding streams that have already been allocated. And I know that some of these federal decisions have been to try to pull back funding streams that have already been allocated. And that's yet again going to be another legal struggle. So I guess the best we can do is to find reliable resources, like we were saying, like Immigrant Connections with Laura Gardner being a reliable one. There are a couple of places that I go to for legal advice. So the LIRC, wait a minute. I don't want to get the acronym wrong. I will make sure that we put that in the handout too. Um, Places that you can go to make sure that you're getting up-to-date legal information about, thank you, the Immigrant Legal Rights Center. I think that is ILRC. I just got them flipped around a little bit. Yes. Let me just go back up and see if there were any other questions that we didn't get to in the chat here. Kelly mentioned the 5 Calls app that kind of lets you know who your government representatives are if you do decide. And again, that's outside of your school day, but if you feel led as a member of your community to be in touch with your representatives, that helps you figure them out and have a place to start. Okay. Well, let's go on then to just kind of start this presentation, which is, we don't yet know what tomorrow will bring, what next week will bring, what else 2025 will bring us. But the best we can do right now is to try our best to identify resources and make plans. So to try to be as proactive as possible and think about, what will we do if we find out that one of our students has a parent or a guardian who's been detained, or what will we do if they're, I know some schools where once, if families either decide to leave or have been detained, then there's a bunch of sad peers in the classroom who miss their student, miss their friend, and teachers are trying to go through with lessons, knowing that there's been a loss and that people are grieving in the community. So it's not, again, not easy times, but I appreciate that you all are not giving up and that you are here tonight to try to glean some more resources and learn from each other. So I really appreciate people being resourceful and sharing what they know tonight. Okay. So we'll dig deeper into kind of understanding the impact of some of these recent stressors and think about how we can help to address the resulting trauma. Again, if you are a school counselor or school social worker or have kind of mental health training, then your role in addressing that trauma will be different than, how teachers or administrators or other staff may think about it, but hopefully we all can kind of find the place where we're working within our capacities and working well together, with referrals and collaborations. And then we'll identify some resources that I hope can be useful to your work, and then think about what else this group thinks it needs. So by the end, maybe we'll make another list of questions of like, what resources are we still lacking? What questions do we still have? And then Kelly and I will pull together some of those resources to send out tomorrow. Okay. So this model is called the core stressors model for newcomers. And so these are just kind of 4 areas that immigrants and refugees have sort of additional stress, worry, or anxiety on top of, just the daily stressors of being, a teenager or an adolescent or a young person. So some of these stressors include resettlement. So if you are a newcomer in a community, regardless of whether you're a citizen or not, you have to figure out how to get your basic needs met again. So like, how do I find a doctor or a medical clinic for my family? How do I figure out a place where I can get food, or where's a safe place for us to live? So resettlement is, just a process of trying to get all of your needs met again. And especially right now, I think people who are newcomers are also feeling fearful that maybe if they like go to a medical clinic or go someplace to request assistance, again, they're afraid of being kind of scooped up into a detention or deportation process. And so I know that the getting basic needs met has become even more challenging. And that might then cause us to think about, is there any way that schools can, serve as a place where there could be, for example, a health fair or a clothing drive or some way that we can help families come to a space where they do already feel safe or know people safer, and help them as much as we can to kind of leverage our space and our knowledge to help them there. There's also the stress of acculturation. So many of you who are, working with multilingual learners already know that the process of learning a new language, can take time. But then there's also the process of learning, the new norms and customs and cultures of your new society. And again, when a person is feeling threatened or unsafe, then they tend to kind of curl back into their ball or just kind of stop engaging as much with the culture or with the community. And so whereas before we may have seen people, reaching out or being in community spaces, trying to integrate themselves into our communities and our society, I think it's likely that we're going to see a pullback and a little bit less of that. And that we might see more of the third bullet point, which is isolation. So whether that's an individual student feeling isolated, or whether that's, whole groups and communities feeling isolated right now. I think that's just something, to really keep our eyes on, that even if we are standing ready to provide resources, people aren't going to come receive those resources from us if they're not feeling, trust and safety. So really thinking about ways to reach out across that isolation and help establish some trust and safety. And then finally, normal, oftentimes migration includes trauma. So whether that's an immigrant coming to this country voluntarily, or a refugee coming to this country involuntarily, fleeing war or persecution, there's just often a lot of challenging things that happen during that migration. We have enough trauma happening like in the right now in real time, but just be aware that whatever their trauma histories are, that is kind of now the current trauma is piled up on top of that. And so it's just a lot. It's a lot for those of us who are adults and working in schools, and it's a lot for our students and families. So I think just, trying to give each other um, a little bit of extra grace right now, and or just integrating into our daily practices, ways to kind of help people ground themselves, feel as safe as possible, take like 5 minutes for like breathing or playing calm music, or, just allowing for the need for people to kind of reground themselves, because we just don't know what they've faced in any given day. And we've already talked about some of these additional mental health stressors that are happening right now. So like the threat of detention and deportation, the threat of dismantling government services, sometimes the threat of, kind of bias or bullying that might be happening, whether outside of school or sometimes in, reductions in funding that we've addressed, fear and mistrust. So what are some of the other concerns or mental health stressors that you all are seeing right now? This list certainly covers a lot, but let me know in the chat if you wish, if there's something else that you're aware of right now. Yes, absolutely. Poor attendance due to these fears. Absolutely. So I know some adults are like feeling too afraid to even go to their jobs, or keeping their kids home because they're just afraid to let their children out of their sight. And I think the question that Janice raised earlier about parents, maybe thinking, if I let my child go to school, what if ICE comes to our house and we are then not there when they get home? Or what if ICE comes to the school and we're not there to, protect our child? So certainly, the daily ritual of saying bye to your kid at the door is now definitely infused with a lot more fear. I see fear, misinformation, isolation, food insecurity, just a lot of question marks about the future for a lot of different groups. Students worried if their parents and relatives, have authorization or have papers. And so students then taking on additional burden of worry for their family members. Some family members just starting to like move out of areas if there's a lot of enforcement activity. Yeah. Okay. And so again, we have a few resources that we will offer that may help with some of this, kind of fear and uncertainty. And again, we know that we're not going to be able to make the whole world right again and make people feel entirely secure. We're just going to be able to do the best that we can at this moment, even if we would like to be able to do more. I think the presence of a caring adult at school or somebody who is trying to reach out to the communities, even if we can't solve all the problems, the fact that we're, there and trying, does mean a lot to folks often. Okay. I'm not going to talk as much about this slide, but for the counselors in the audience, probably trauma is something that was part of your training program. And I think it's just really important for us to remember that all of this trauma that we've just talked about not only just makes people's emotions, you know, uh, erratic, but it also, can just affect the way our brains process things or affect our behaviors in a way that's, hard for us to control. So for example, if you think for a minute about, a time when you felt fearful or unsafe or worried about something, and then if in that moment I said to you, I'm going to give you an algebra quiz now, you could just imagine that your brain was was so busy worrying about your survival that it would not be able to do a good job at an algebra quiz. So I think we just have to really be aware that everything from students' ability to attend, to sit and listen, to complete work on time. We might be seeing physical symptoms in addition to emotional or behavioral. So it's going to just affect almost every part of what students do. And so again, the most important thing we can do in response is just try our best to reinforce safety. So safety by classroom rituals, safety by inviting counselors and or social workers, to kind of be present in the classrooms if they can, helping to find out what basic needs students have and seeing if there's anything we can do about those. So just doing everything we can to try to, think of what can I do to help this student just feel a little bit more safe than they feel right now, or a little bit less kind of activated and stressed. So again, that beginning part of the presentation is a lot of the terror, the stress, the anxiety. So hopefully we can all just take a quick breath together, knowing that working around situations where people are feeling stressed, it's easy to take some of that on. So encouraging you to do all you can to take care of yourselves, because it's hard to assist others when we're also just in a state of, anxiety and worry and fear. So I'm going to encourage us then to think together about what does our school and does your school, and in particular your immigrant or refugee population, need from you right now? So it could just be, proactive planning to figure so that we can tell them we know what we will do if ICE would come to our school. We have a policy and we're letting you know that, we have a plan. Or it could be, like Kelly said, that maybe after this professional development session tonight, you might think of other people in the building who you would like to share the recording with. Or you might think of other ways that people in your school, may need to receive additional briefings about the legalities and kind of make people feel more certain that they do know what they can and can't do in response to immigration situations. It could be that, schools are developing new policies and practices. It would be great probably to have a good amount of input. So if you're a counselor, if you're an administrator, if you're a teacher, if you have other roles, to try to help think in a holistic way about how can we address safety concerns, how can we make sure that we're doing our best for our students right now in these very difficult times. It could be that you decide There are some more direct services that you could do in your particular role. And I know we have a lot of different roles here tonight, but there might be things that you can do to help promote greater belonging for students. So there might be like additional student organizations or like opportunities for like buddy systems or ways to kind of help students feel like there is someone at school who, will notice if they're not there and will reach out and ask, or, who will welcome them in and listen to their concerns. Maybe thinking about what processes the school has to do some outreach to families or to the adults in the community. So thinking again about what is within your role to do there. There could also be maybe some indirect services. So thinking about what are some of the immigrant or refugee serving entities in your community that maybe you can, establish closer connections with, or they could serve as, they could come into the schools to help educate school staff, or they could be a place where you could kind of refer families who have questions for you that you're not sure how to answer. So maybe this is a good time to really strengthen those connections. Let me see what else, if anything else, people have thought about in terms of what are our schools and our immigrant and refugee youth needing from us right now. One person in the chat said, definitely that as we're making our plans, that verbalizing those to either our students or beyond them to family members can just help reduce that uncertainty and help them feel like, okay, um, you know, the people around me, the adults in this room are trying their best to, make sure that I can be safe. Distributing Know Your Rights cards is a great idea as long as the school is not gonna come back with any negative backlash to you. So making sure that you're taking good care of yourself as you think about informing your populations. That's maybe another place where connecting with community resources can be a place where if you're told that you're not allowed to distribute those cards, which I know some schools have made that decision, then you could figure out where are some places in the community where they're doing those presentations of Know Your Rights or distributing some of those red cards. Great ideas. Anything else that's occurring to y'all? Consistency and calm. Opportunities to have fun. Oh, I love it. So reserving the gym, creating a district slideshow. Yeah, so that people are getting the same messages, even like across different schools. Like I might have a student in elementary and a student in middle school. And so it's really helpful if people aren't getting different information in different spaces. So yes, talking in one voice. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go through just a few resources that I'm aware of, and please, if these make you think of other things, please do keep sharing them. An ESL family game night, that's wonderful. Again, like using the spaces that we have in this school to help create that sense of safety and belonging. The U.S. Department of Education, long may it stand, does have this Newcomer toolkit. And so I made sure that I had downloaded it because I know a lot of federal websites that I had been going to sometimes are sort of going blank right now, or information is being pulled down. And so if you just Google U.S. Department of Education Newcomer Toolkit, it has, these are the different sections. So, just helping to describe who are newcomers, but then thinking specifically about ways we can welcome newcomers to our schools, support their social emotional learning, thinking about, kind of instruction, if you're more on the instructional side, and then also, effective ways to establish partnerships with families. This is the English version, but they do also have it in other languages as other resources. So this is one thing that may be useful. This is actually a screenshot of the Immigrant Connections blog that we were mentioning earlier, and that's Laura Gardner there in that little picture. So if you go to the Immigrant Connections website, this is from the blog. And so if you find where her blog postings are, one of them is kind of the sample policies of what to do if ICE comes to your school. And then there's also just this one about tips for helping to support student attendance, which again was a concern that we saw raised in this room too. So I think she's trying to blog as often as she can right now. And you can also sign up to receive a newsletter from Immigrant Connections. There's also other resources like the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, NCTSN, which has a lot of both sort of instructional pieces about understanding child traumatic stress, but also some, kind of tools and toolkits, like what can you do, especially if you are in a, counseling, psychology, social work type role. Oh, thank you, Kelly, for putting that link in the chat to the Immigrant Connections website. Okay. I'm also going to just share some information that comes from UNICEF, which I think we often think of UNICEF as kind of an internationally facing group, but there is UNICEF USA. And so depending on where you are, some communities do have kind of the UNICEF USA offices there. But as part of their humanitarian work in international contexts, they have done a lot of thinking about how to work with children who are in these very kind of uncertain situations, right? Like kids who are in refugee camps, or people who are fleeing and don't even have homes yet. And so these UNICEF has some great ideas. So including things like, how do we make sure that we're not inadvertently doing any harm to children, like asking them, kind of intrusive questions when they may not be in a mental space where they can really recount something traumatic at the moment. Maybe kind of coercing them to participate in activities that we think could be, helpful to them, but maybe if they're, again, just not ready to do that, it could be upsetting to them. Making sure that if your role does include providing emotional support to children, that we're doing that in a way that they have privacy, that it's not kind of in the middle of a classroom or a hallway, and that we're not exposing them if they're going to share something, that might put another person into danger. So just some best practices for making sure that we're not causing any additional harm. Another part of their best practices include, secondary stress for those who are interacting in these contexts. And so I know you've probably heard and thought about a lot of these reminders, but I'll just be another voice saying again to like pay attention to your own fatigue, make sure that you recognize the warning signs for yourself of when your, cup is empty and you just need to like step back for a minute and let someone else step forward and take care of the needs. Try your best to get good rest, to do some calming exercises or to take walks outside. Remembering that even as we would like to participate in helping, that it's not all on our shoulders. So we're part of teams when we work in schools. So make sure that you're in communication with your coworkers and that you ask for help when you need it, or that you allow other people to kind of help solve problems and carry burdens. And then the last one I think is especially some of you who are logged in may also be immigrants or refugees yourselves or have family members with those experiences. And so I know it can be really personal and that much more intense for you. And so just a reminder again that the insights that you have from having had similar experiences make you an invaluable person, but you also probably can be mindful not to overextend or put yourself in a space where you're going to exhaust yourself and then not be able to help anyone. So just reminders to really be good to yourselves right now. To go along with what somebody said about, activities, fun, like a chance to like relieve some of that stress, the UNICEF website also has this adolescent kit for expression and has this activity box. And so again, their resources come in a variety of languages. And because they're used to working in refugee camps or other kind of less structured spaces, these activities don't require a lot of like materials or cost anything. They're things that can just be really easily done. And so if you're ever just wondering like, okay, I'd like to, do a 5 minute, quick activity in my class every morning, or I'd like to implement something, during an after school time or a break. This activity box might be a place you could go just to think about um, some things that have worked with children who are in these kind of traumatic spaces in the past. Okay, let me just check on time. We're doing good. So I know that many of the immigrant and refugee serving community organizations that I would have recommended to you before are also experiencing their own stress right now. Like in Greensboro, we have Church World Service, and many of those folks were just furloughed or they're, so many of the immigrant and refugee serving organizations may have less to offer you right now, but it's always good to check. And so, thinking about what are the community organizations that you could connect with. I have through English Learner Portal a 15-hour self-paced course that takes these little nuggets that we've talked about tonight and just spends a lot more time walking you through a process to think about best practices for working with populations that have been trauma impacted. And then it's most focused for school counselors, school social workers, PPWs, school psychologists, but anybody who is interested is welcome, certainly. So by the end of the course, we've worked on a kind of step-by-step creation of a school service plan or professional development plan that will most likely mean that you would be able to kind of put some pieces in place over the summer and then start the school year in the fall with a really thorough trauma-informed plan ready to go. And I know when the world is on fire, it kind of feels like, I don't know if I have time for a 15-hour self-paced course, and like, I don't know what the world's going to look like in the fall. But I just wanted to let you all know that that resource is available if it should prove to be, the right match for you. Kelly also has other professional development opportunities that are teacher focused. And oh, thank you, Gregoria put the link for the Department of Education Newcomer Toolkit in the chat. So thank you for that. So let me stop again and just see at this point what has been helpful to you all, or what other questions do you still have? So what are some other things that Kelly and I can work to find some resources for that may be useful to you in your role as you keep trying to work with your immigrant and refugee students and families? Okay. Well, I'll still leave a few more minutes in case people think of other kind of questions or resources that they would like to receive. Just to kind of recap what we've talked about so far, we did have the ILRC listed as a resource for legal related questions. We had Immigrant Connections listed as a resource to assist people in thinking about things like school policies for immigration enforcement responses, and thinking about ways to kind of encourage school attendance and help support families in this challenging time. We've seen the Department of Education Newcomers Toolkit and looked at the UNICEF resource. I'm just scrolling back up through here to see. People talked about Know Your Rights campaigns, including verbal information sharing and cards or pieces of paper. let's see what else. We talked a little bit about, basic needs and food insecurity and thinking about ways that we can help support our communities with that. Looking. Okay. So as you think about any other questions that you may have, I just wanted to remind us that being in community with each other as teachers, school counselors, service providers in this area is also an important thing we can do to share knowledge, to commiserate, to support each other. So I appreciate you all being here with each other as part of this community tonight. And I will stay online for a few minutes if people do have additional questions. And I just really, again, want to thank Kelly for supporting this work and providing the space, and really English Learner Portal for all of the great work that it does.
I also want to say thank you to everyone. It's great to get an update on what's going on, especially with so many things being funded, not being funded, and rules changing and everything going on. That will make an effort to keep checking back in with our bigger community and try to keep you updated. I need to get Laura Gardner on our schedule to give some updates too. And we also work with an immigration lawyer, but I know she is swamped, so I don't know if we're going to be able to get her on our schedule, but we'll try our best. And then, oh, see, Natasha Quiroga, she is who I was just thinking of.
Yep.
Um, yeah, she's our go-to person for the legal pieces, and so I've talked to her a few times, and she said, because she has a few courses that she offers through English Learner Portal, and she said, can you close them because everything has changed? And so we've been talking about her finding time to update. But maybe we can get her in for a Q&A session. So stay tuned. And if you think of other webinar topics you'd like to see happen, you are always welcome to reach out. And I'm sure there's somebody in our group of colleagues here who can speak to the different topics. So thank you again for your time and for continuing to support our work and for all you do for the students.
Absolutely.